program for the candidates this evening. It's a wonderful opportunity for the public to evaluate candidates by listening to them talk and answer questions, and MEChA deserves a great deal of credit for hosting this tonight. I'm Ann Olmstead. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, North County, San Diego, and I am very pleased to be here tonight with my fellow league members as a moderating team for this event. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots organization. Our goal is to help voters become educated and learn how to find information so that they can be informed voters. We have an education arm, and this forum is an example of the kind of thing that we do in order to help voters become informed. We also form positions on issues on our other side of our organization, which is our action arm. But tonight, we are doing only education. We never support or oppose candidates or political parties. Tonight, we are delighted to help voters have an opportunity to ask questions and evaluate 4 or 5, we're not sure yet about our 5th candidate, of the 9 candidates seeking the 50th Congressional District seat. Candidates, Amar, Campanagir, Carl DeMaio, and Brian Jones were not able to attend tonight for other commitments that they had made. We have not heard from Mr. Isa, so we don't know if he's coming or not. But just in case he is, Mr. Campanagir did send a statement, which I will read to you later when we're doing the candidate statements. So here are the rules for the event tonight. The candidates were seated in random order. Each one will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Our timer is sitting right there, and she will show you the paddles that she will be holding up. She will give a 1-minute warning, she'll give a 30-second warning, and she will give a stop sign. Nobody goes past that stop sign. Maybe a little bit. They have 1 minute to answer each question. They have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 1 minute to answer a question that is posed, and they will have 1 minute for a closing statement. So audience, what's your job tonight? Your job is to submit clearly written questions on cards. 1 question per card. We have runners. Would the runners raise their hands, please? We have 2 runners, 3 runners, who will distribute cards. If you want a card or a pen, raise your hand. They will also come if you have a card in your hand and hold it up to take it to bring it down. So that's what the runners do. The sorters who are sitting over here to my left, neither of whom live in this district, because we try to be very impartial here, will sort the questions for duplication and relevancy. It's very important that we not spend our time answering questions that have nothing to do with the job of a congressman. So we will sort the questions for relevancy to the task that they're being asked, that they're running for. And we also do not take personal questions. I also do not live in the 50th district, just so you know. The goal tonight is to ask as many questions as possible and on as wide a variety of topics as we are possible, that we can get to during our time. To that end, I request that you not take up any time with applause or any other actions to express your opinion of any candidate's statements. By listening carefully, all of you will be able to judge for yourself what you take away from this forum. We will begin with the candidates' opening statements with
I'm Dr. Helen Horvath.
Thank you so much.
Are you ready to start?
I'm ready. Please
Where's your
start.
clock?
2
Okay.
minutes.
I'd like to recognize the League's 100th anniversary, and February is Black History Month. It's very important that we celebrate diversity. I'm a high school dropout with a doctorate's degree in psychology and organizational development. I have 22 years of federal government experience. Now we have to start all over again. We're good? Okay. Honorably discharged veteran and veteran advocate. I've held a secret security clearance for more than 22 years. More information is available at horvathcampaign.com. As a graduate of Bowie State University at Hibiku, I have a diverse background and experience in creating community change. One of my favorite civil rights activists, Maya Angelou, said, "Each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women." I stand up for all women today to represent diversity and inclusion in our communities for all. As a child, I experienced the civil rights movement. I listened to Medgar Evers, American civil rights activist and World War II Army veteran, as he worked to overturn segregation in Mississippi. I feel sadness still today at his murder. As a nation and community, we're moving backwards in our fight for equal rights for all. Women in particular are losing equal rights grounds daily. Congress has created laws for women to protect employment, sick leave, and other issues. Many of these laws do not get passed timely. Ironically, Congress continues to attempt to take away women's reproductive rights. These Republican candidates use personal religious beliefs and overshadow the diversity and inclusion needs of the community to seek to control and oppress women, LGBTQ, and others in their platforms, and is tied to discrimination in housing, employment, and equal opportunity. The intent is clear: use religion as a mixed with politics to confuse and control candidates by not supporting sound diversity legislation.
Go ahead and finish your sentence. In the legal case, Evers versus Board of Education, Justice Black wrote, "The clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state. The wall crumbles when mixing religion and politics." Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mrs. Jahn.
Good evening. First, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Palomar Community College student organization, MEChA, for hosting tonight's forum. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to introduce myself to the people of the 50th Congressional District. I applaud the courage and dedication to democracy of our hosts tonight. As a Zero Donate candidate, I am grateful the size of my campaign fund is not a qualifier for participation. I only have $22.22 in my congressional campaign fund right now. I would like to share with you a personal story. My oldest daughter, as a young teen, once said to me, "Mom, you don't protect us." What she said next was, "You inform us, and that is better. Because then we know how to protect ourselves." My first goal as your Congresswoman is to inform the people of the 50th Congressional District about the decisions being made by our legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government, and how those decisions affect your daily life, not just for today, but for your future. The following quote from one of our country's founders illustrates the importance of an informed electorate. James Madison said in his address at the Virginia Convention on June 16, 1788, "I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations." This is where we find ourselves today. You, the people of the 50th District, need to know what the legislation says and how your freedoms are being encroached upon. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Wilkins.
Thank you. I feel like I kind of frog in my throat. I didn't come with any prepared remarks, and the reason being was because a lot of policy issues are very hard to solve, and they can't be solved in a couple talking points. And I know this from experience. I just came off a year in the 116th Congress of the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee. And it's a bipartisan committee on the Hill. I medically retired from the SEAL teams after 11 years in the Navy. Helen referenced my religious beliefs, and you know now those are my beliefs, and those are the values I hold. So I hope that you all can see my heart to serve you, because my religious beliefs are for service to others. And I want to take this experience and the evil that I've seen around the world and help the district. Not suppress, but I want to help. Policy is about making the best decisions for the people. And my religious values, they're something that, you know, they're a foundation. Any religion, which could be atheism, which is a lack of religion, just a religion in itself. Anything can be made a religion. So, with this religiously free country, I hope that you all can project my heart in policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I would also like to thank the League of Women Voters and the MEChistas and MEChA. That's how we all say the name. But I would also like to thank all the people that came here tonight on a Friday night after work, sacrificing time with their families, sacrificing their time, their very limited time, to come and participate in the political process. I'm a local boy. I was raised in the 50th district. My mom and sister both teach in the 50th district. My brother's enlisted in the Navy and stationed in Norfolk right now. I did all of my education in East County, and I grew up amongst the people there. Hardworking people, all the time working and building the wealth of our society. I'm running with the Peace and Freedom Party, a political party known as a third party that has its roots back to the 60s and 70s, the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s. I'm running, and I'm proud to be running on that legacy because that's how I got involved in politics, was through organizing in my community after the unjust killing of an unarmed man. It was through organizing against the illegal and unethical ban on sharing food with homeless people in my hometown that got me organized into politics. And our platform is one on guaranteeing basic human dignity for the people of the 50th district in action, not just in word. Today, not tomorrow. So we're fighting for constitutional amendments guaranteeing housing, healthcare, education, these as human rights endowed in our Constitution. That's what we're fighting for, not more conversation. People of the 50th district know what's going wrong. It's skyrocketing rents, it's eroding infrastructure, and it's a lack of stability in their lives. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to take a lot of these questions and bring these issues to the forefront, not as ideological talking points to be bartered over or to be moved around like a chess piece on a chessboard, but as real urgent issues that are affecting thousands of people, not just in the 50th district, but all over the nation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We're not going to hear from Mr. Oda for a while, apparently. He may come later. But in the meantime, go ahead and just keep that.
Okay.
Pass it over
back?
first. She's going to be first. Mr. Cortes. Pass it
I thought I was going to go first.
over. She's going to be first. Okay, first question. How can we keep ICE out of my city?
Well, Immigration and Naturalization Services, unfortunately, there's an enforcement aspect, and I did a lot of research on the issue. There are certain standards with regard to illegal immigration that we need to change. So one of the ways that I have been reviewing ways to take out immigration from the communities is looking at the policies and procedures, how laws are written, and then modifying the amnesty process, one. And number two, we need to also act in the best interest of the community. And I know that's a broad-based response, but there's a more in-depth 3-minute response that I can't give you, unfortunately. But I have more information for you if you'd like to talk to me about that. Thank you.
Mrs. Jahn.
like Helen says, the issue is not that simple. We have quite a history of immigration law. If you go to my website, LucindaKWHJahn.com, I have something I've written there, and also several links to things that we are doing. But I don't believe that our borders should be unregulated. They should be. I also understand that we can't just move billions of people onto the landmass that's the United States and solve all of the world's problems. I took a biology class. There's something called the carrying capacity. So I'm well aware of that. I'm also aware of that there's a lot of law that needs to be sorted through, and it's not an easy concept to solve, and it's not going to be solved in a minute. Sorry, can't give you a pat answer either.
Mr. Wilkins,
So how can I get ICE out of my city?
how can we keep ICE out of my city?
Okay.
That's the question.
Right, ICE isn't going away. And the local enforcement and state enforcement agencies need to work with ICE because they're after violent criminals. Not because, policy is very, very complex. Very complex. And we want to get rapists and murderers. We want to track them. We want to track drugs. But at the same time, we want to provide great immigration policy, and that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing when immigrants are being used as drug mules. Not all, but some, and we need strict enforcement of the border. And unfortunately, unless we take military action against the cartels, drugs will continue, human trafficking will continue across the border, and that's something we don't want to happen. So we have to be humane about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes.
All right, so I'm going to try to cover a lot of ground, but I'll do it quick. ICE is a modern construct. It didn't exist a few decades ago, right? It didn't exist for the long period of time that our people have lived in this country and have traveled across this border. And it doesn't acknowledge the fundamental issue at hand here, the imperialist wars that are being waged across the world that are driving the migration and the people that are seeking refuge. I also want to say, how do we keep ICE out of our city? The way we did in 2006, by mobilizing our people, by organizing, by tens of thousands of us taking to the streets and demanding accountability and demanding human dignity for our families, for the people that build the wealth, the people that clean up the hospital rooms, the people that teach our kids, the people that build our roads. These are real human beings that aren't just talking points. They deserve human dignity, they deserve protection. And how we do that is by organizing our people like we did, and we have historical precedent doing. Our organization, our political party, has precedent and does this outside of election cycles, and that is how we're gonna keep ICE out of our city.
Thank you. The next question,
And you should use the microphone when you.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
The back row, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I don't need the microphone. I got a pass. Okay, the next question will begin with Mrs. Jahn. And it is, what will you do? Sorry, I'm used to having a microphone. I can move that out of the way. What will you do to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression?
Gerrymandering. Well, we're gonna have to start, I didn't come prepared for that one, really, and we're just gonna have to start voting legislators in. The districts are drawn by the state and drawn at the state level, is my understanding. So that means you're gonna have to start talking to your state representatives about how this process is done and changing the law on how they're drawn. But the other thing is I want you to know that in the 50th district, almost 30% of us, over 30% of us are nonpartisan now. So we've got a voice, use it. Tell them you don't want these lines drawn along party lines any longer. There's a voice in the middle that's growing. And I would let your state legislatures know that this is not how you want it done.
Mr. Wilkins.
So, enabling rural communities to have the same power as cities. When it comes to business development, this is one thing that I've been looking into to keep people that want to stay in the rural communities because they tend to be the lowest income. I grew up in a rural area, and we've got high-speed networks everywhere, and we want to push business development into the rural areas. We want to push entrepreneurship into the rural areas, and when people become incentivized to live out in the country like they were, if they were raised there, because like we had to come into the city just to survive. That's one of the ways that we can distribute the power, the political power as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes?
So gerrymandering is an institutionalized form of racism that has existed in a way of voter suppression that has existed in this country since almost its very founding, right? It's been founded on eliminating the ability for mass participation either by a lot of complicated jerry-rigging or a lot of just things like we're seeing with what the 50th district is, half of El Cajon, parts of this district, parts of that district. So how do we combat and how do we fight voter suppression and gerrymandering? The same way we're going to fight a lot of these institutionalized issues. We're going to bring forums and workshops and actual town halls back to the 50th district to train and organize our people, to prepare them for when they're combating institutionalized bureaucracy and apathy like we see at the state level, the federal level, the local level even. What we're going to be doing is we're building a movement to fight these institutional evils. We're not just hoping that somebody in a political office of power, someone in the halls of power right now, takes pity on us. We're actually going to organize our people to do that. And just like any sort of gain that we've had, that's how we actually get it.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkins, you're the next one.
Oh.
No, he already
I
did
didn't
it.
answer a question.
Oh, I'm
He
sorry.
already answered.
You're right.
Sorry. Okay, so gerrymandering is a really tough issue in this community. We need to look at the state level of how the Secretary of State and other organizations create the boundaries. Currently, there's going to be a review of the boundaries for the 50th district and every district in the county, in the state, and they'll hold meetings. So what you can do is become involved. You go out and say, this is not right. Congressional representatives cannot, unfortunately, influence the districts. But I've spoken to Mr. Vu, the registrar of voter, recently. One of the main issues that I found in reviewing all of the files for people in our district is that the people are listed in 2 different locations, things like that. Some people are registered in the 50th, but live in Oceanside, and that's outside of our district. So we need to do an examination of that process and examine how people are registered without violating privacy rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll pass it down to Mr. Wilkins. All right, next question. President Trump has taken steps towards increasing aggression with countries like Cuba, Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and more. Question. Do you support sanctions and blockades on sovereign nations?
Yes.
Are you done?
You have to punish when bad actors are acting up. I mean, if I'm not able to punish North Korea and push sanctions onto them, I'm not able to put a stop to their uranium trade. And if I'm not able to push sanctions onto Iran, then they gain more money so they can continue to take out terrorist activities around the Middle East. And if I don't push sanctions onto Venezuela, then they will continue to suppress their people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes.
Definitively no. No, I don't support sanctions. Sanctions are a war crime known as collective punishment by the UN that target the most vulnerable people in these countries. Any sort of misconstrued idea that they target bad actors or something like that completely ignores the material realities of what we saw in Iraq, what we've seen all over the world where we apply sanctions. Venezuela has had tens of thousands of people die, children, the elderly, the sick, people that are being prevented from accessing medicine, food, the critical infrastructure that is needed to support a society. All of this has been done by the US through sanctions, which are lauded as better than war. I stand definitively with the working people of the world against sanctions and against the economic bullying of this country to gain access to another country's labor or natural resources. And I'm not afraid to say it.
Thank you. Can you pass that back up to Mrs. Horvath?
Actually, it's Dr. Horvath. Sorry. Okay, so one of the things that I always examine as a veteran is what is the purpose of our being in a particular country? What are we doing to help that country? What are we treaty-wise? There are treaties that govern behaviors in countries. And so when someone signs, say the SALT Pact or the NAFTA trade agreement, if you don't abide by them, what are you going to give them as a discipline for violating the rules? One of the things used, unfortunately, is sanctions. I don't agree with all of the sanctions, but some of them need to be in place. As someone who was in Washington, D.C. during 9/11, I had friends in the Pentagon who were killed. And we need to protect our borders, and we need to protect the people who live here. And that's you. And whether legal or illegal, we need to protect everyone within our country. And we can't do that when we have bad actors like Korea threatening to go to Guam, which is a U.S. territory, and bomb it. Thank you.
Mrs. Jahn.
Could you repeat the question for me?
President Trump has taken steps towards increasing aggression with countries like Cuba, Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and more. Do you support sanctions and blockades on sovereign nations?
Okay, we are talking about human behavior here. I think the results of these sanctions, the blockades, it's economic warfare. Absolutely, it is. We've changed our warfare from outright guns all the time to economic sanctions. And yeah, the results are kind of mixed. They're a mixed bag because what's a reward to one or what's a punishment to one isn't to another. So it's not that simple. I think you do have to sanction behavior and bad behavior. And it's the bad behavior of a government. I want to make the distinction. It's not of the people, but of the government. And unfortunately, you're gonna have to sanction bad behavior, and that's how humans work.
Thank you. Could you pass that to Mr. Cortes, please? Okay, next question. The U.S. has spent over $5 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the military budget is over $750 billion. Question. How is it realistic to talk about tax cuts on social programs given this fact?
Oh, it's a completely unrealistic thing when they're talking about more austerity for working families while giving handouts to billion-dollar defense contractors and private military contractors. Like, it doesn't take somebody with an advanced degree to see that our incursions into Iraq, into Afghanistan, and into Libya have yielded nothing but instability, ethnic cleansing, and the displacement of millions. All of this has done nothing for the working people of this country, and most definitely nothing for the people who have been slaughtered for profit in these invaded countries. What it has done a lot for is billion-dollar corporations like Boeing, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, who have made record profits with guaranteed contracts supplying hardware that then gets shipped over here to our domestic police forces that suppress our right to protest in this country. So I would say that we're spending way too much on the military right now in this country, specifically on military contractors and defense contractors. And it's, we should be giving them the cuts, not our people.
Thank you. Can you pass that back up to Dr. Horvath?
I got lost in the question. Can you say it again?
Sure. The U.S. has spent over $5 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the military budget is over $780 billion. How is it realistic to talk about tax cuts or sorry, I can't read that. It's like, to me. Tax cuts or social programs given this fact?
So first, part of $780 $80 billion is distinctly dealing with military personnel, their safe housing, resolving issues like in Anniston, Army Depot, where they have environmental issues, and support of small business through federal government contracting. Yes, larger firms get a lot of money, but without the way this whole process works for contracting is that if you don't have federal contracts, we won't have enough people to operate the government. So I don't agree with large business having the contracts. I look at small business support. The other part of this is basically what is our purpose to be in Iraq, and I think our purpose has expired. We need to look at different ways of resolving issues in the Middle East besides guns and ammo, and I'm a veteran, I know guns and ammo, so we need to find different methods of dealing with this. As your congressional rep, I will work on those issues. Thank you.
Mrs. Jahn.
Does sound like we spend a lot on the military. And we do have a large part of this country that actually works for those contractors. It would be a big economic change and a big economic shift. I think we've spent a lot of money on wars. I don't think we're in Iraq for the oil or any of those things that we've mentioned before. I think we're there because we want a base in that region strategically so we could be on the underbelly of China and Russia, frankly. But even if you stopped spending every dollar on the military, you still wouldn't cover all of our costs for Social Security, Medicare, all those other things, even if you stop spending every dollar on the military. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to get some information from you later.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're hearing comments down here that I don't think the people making the comments want us to hear. I think the acoustics are better in this room than you realize. Thank you. Mr. Wilkins.
Just repeat the question, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
The U.S. has spent over $5 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the military budget is over $780 billion. How is it realistic to talk about tax cuts of social or social programs, given this fact?
So there's an Inspector General's report on Afghanistan, and certainly lessons learned from that, that there needs to be a goal to our war and an end in sight. There's also a huge need to spend that money, because if we don't, our enemies will catch up. They have advanced military technologies, which they have stolen from us. And China's coming up. They are an economic engine. You think we're going to be ahead here soon? We're not. So we better get improvements into cybersecurity infrastructure, and a lot of what Helen said that I'm just kind of adding on. So thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, would you pass that back up to Dr. Horvath? Okay. What are your thoughts on 1, Equal Pay Act, closing the gender wage gap, and 2, what can you do to enforce and make it happen?
That's my shtick. That's what I work on. I am very much an advocate for equal rights, as I started talking about it earlier. One of the things that we need to look at, I want the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. I lauded it in an article. If you look up East County Times, December 18th, an article on the Equal Rights Amendment. We have to get that passed. It is now in a different form called the Equal Rights Act. And the Republicans are not supporting that because it has gender bias issues. Not gender bias, it has LGBTQ issues in it and a variety of other things. The way we're going to get equal pay is by passing the Equal Pay Act. And in Congress, as your congressional rep, I will work on all of those issues. That's my commitment. And that's what I've been working on for the past 6-7 years, and to include resolving sexual assault in the military and human trafficking that's all involved in this process. And we can talk more, but I'm going to be out of time in about 10 seconds. So I hope that answers your question, and we will continue. Thank you.
Mrs. Jahn.
Equal, frankly, I work in the entertainment industry and I haven't once got paid less than the men I work with. I get paid according to the value of the job. If it were an issue of people were actually not paying the same, then yes, it would be legislation that we could pass. It would be labor law that you would have to look into and work with the rest of Congress on passing laws, labor laws, that don't allow women or others to be paid less for the same job. But honestly, it would be something I have to look at more because I've always gotten paid the same as the guy next to me. So that's where that one's at. I won't lie to you.
Mr. Wilkins.
Okay, you please repeat the question. Thank you.
What are your thoughts on one, the Equal Pay Act, closing the gender wage gap, and two, what can you do to enforce and make it happen?
So I named my daughter after Lydia, which she was a woman in the Bible who sold the color purple. And the reason I named her after this is because I expect my daughter to be competitive, and if you're being suppressed at your job, right, that's immoral. If you're a woman being suppressed by men, that's immoral. So leave that job, go find a better environment. But if there's anything going on that's completely immoral, in my view, I wouldn't want my daughter to have to deal with that. My wife had to deal with that in the entertainment industry. So I don't want my daughter having to deal with that. Those are my personal views on that.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes.
So I also would stand with the ERA and an immediate reform that would win material improvements for the lives of women in this country today. That would be something that we would be fighting as well for, but also for the issues that don't get brought up as much. For example, subsidized or free childcare in this country. The fact that unpaid labor, known as domestic labor, is often used as a way to shackle women. The fact that most women that experience homicide are done by their intimate partner. And these are the ways that we would be bringing up these issues and closing that gender pay gap, is by providing housing for women, by providing guaranteed stable wages and guaranteed housing and health care, reproductive and sexual health care for women in these countries as guaranteed rights. One piece of legislation in itself is not going to rectify an entire system and centuries of oppression, but we will be fighting for material reforms in the here today as we build a movement winning these rights for women tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you pass that back up to Dr. Horvath? Oh, no, sorry, to Mrs. Jahn.
Oh.
All right. What will be your first steps to combat global warming?
Well, one of the things I find ironic is we keep talking about the wonders of an economy based on consumption and go, wow, how wonderful that is, and we don't bring it up with climate change. I mean, they're related. So one of the first things we need to do is get away from an economy based on gross consumption. There's no easy way to do it. It's going to be a major shift. It's going to mean giving up some of the things that we like. It's going to mean changing human behavior and making different choices. That's going to have to be sort of a natural process. I don't know that it could be forced through legislation, but we can start companies on lowering their carbon footprint we can start lowering our carbon footprint. We can make those decisions ourselves. We don't have to wait.
Mr. Wilkins.
This is something I studied on the Energy and Commerce Committee. So the 100% clean energy by 2045. If we're manufacturing solar panels in a country that does not respect climate rights, which would be China, it takes a ton of energy to produce solar panels. There's carbon, right? So if you want to produce something clean, then move the manufacturing back here into the States to where we can have oversight into clean manufacturing of solar panels. Dams, hydro, they're not scalable, and they have a huge economic impact. So what do? We clear our forests, land management practices, so that the fuel is not there for the fires to burn hotter and hotter. We build desalinization plants so we can pump water and put the load off of the dams in California. So that's, you can kind of look at Israel, whether you agree with them socially or not, as a model to look at for climate. Thanks.
Mr. Cortes.
Can you actually repeat the question for me one more time?
Sure. Can you, let me see now. Wrong question.
Sneak peek.
What will be your first steps to combat global warming?
Alrighty, so the US military currently has hundreds of bases all over the world right now. Those military bases produce as much carbon as the country of Peru. Right now, those military bases serve only one interest, projecting US hegemony and strength across the world, trying to impose an economic one-party system on the entire world. We would close the military bases in occupied countries, reducing one of the biggest polluters this world has ever seen in the process. We would also differ on the approach that we can capitalism our way out of the climate change that our country and our world is currently experiencing. We would be pushing for legislation, moving for green energy today, fighting for increased renewable energy right here in California, and building jobs in that sustainable renewable energy right here in the 50th district, where right over those mountains we have the wind farms that are powering many, many homes right now. We would expand and incentivize that instead of the fossil fuel industry that receives billions of kickbacks every year.
Can you repeat the question again? It's been a lot of answers. Sorry.
Okay. What would be your first steps to combat global warming?
So, Mr. Cortes said cancel all military locations. That's a huge mistake. That's our NATO treaty. We cannot afford not to have those relationships with other countries to promote change within the global community. Netherlands and NATO, for example, have agreements with different countries through treaties to create changes in the climate and how we access, how we actually work within environments through the military. Protecting our environment is one of the most important responsibilities we have. We must be a leader in reducing our dependence on fossil fuel, investing in renewable and sustainable technologies that will power our economy and our lives. I totally agree with having renewable energy. My first thing in Congress would be to sit down and meet with key players in Congress regarding this issue to come up with further solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Jahn.
I already answered.
Oh, that's right. And I have this chart in front of me that's supposed to help me, right? All right, Mr. Wilkins, you're the next question.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have two questions now related to housing. And the gist of both the questions is, what steps would you take to address the growing crisis related to the cost of renting and of buying housing?
Yeah, it's bad. It takes a ton of years, it's a couple decades sometimes, to build or develop a housing project. So loosening up these permit restrictions and when it comes to clearing the brush around those communities, improving the roads and the egress, ingress routes out of those communities, especially in rural areas, is very, very important. as well as making sure that we can empower communities in rural areas to have, say, corporate centers, high-speed internet networks, where we can look at doing work outside the main city and lower the costs of just having to work in the city. I worked in DC. It's not pleasant. So, thank you.
Mr. Cortes.
Housing affordability is a major issue here in Southern California. I have been fighting on campaigns back in National City with Measure W, statewide, with Prop 10, because right now rents are skyrocketing. AB 1482 here in the state is a good start, but it's not enough. And so what our solution to the housing crisis is addressing the 80,000 empty homes in this country, in this county right now that are just sitting vacant, waiting for property values to rise, so speculators can make a quick buck. What we need is not to give more handouts to developers that are already overdeveloping our region and partially causing some of the horrible wildfires that we're seeing and some of the issues that we're experiencing in the 50th district. What we need is to call out the greed, and specifically the corporate greed of these corporate landlords from New York, from Chicago, from the Bay Area, that are buying up our neighborhoods, pushing out our families, and raising the rent sometimes hundreds of dollars at a time on working families. These are solutions that we can fight for both locally by eliminating outdated laws like Costa-Hawkins, but also nationally for national rent control laws. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a program called Housing First in San Diego. I've worked with Omar Passons and also with David Estrella, the Director of Housing and Community Development in San Diego. I actually have, as a veteran, I'm on the Military Veterans Advisory Council that I used to chair. One of the things is that Mr. Cortes suggested is filling up those 80,000 empty homes. Well, this is a free market. We cannot take someone's home to force them to lower their rent. That's not making sense. What we can do is come up with rent restrictions or basically requirements for certain cost levels, like they did recently. I don't know about you, but I had my rent lowered recently because of a California state bill. And it was only $25, but it was $25. And we need to look at how we're going to do this as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Jahn.
I think part of the problem is the market itself. Several years ago, we threw a bunch of cash at it so we could maintain the housing bubble. We didn't let the market find its way back to equilibrium. We threw a bunch of cash in it to try to keep the monies up. And I look at it, if I were to buy a property to rent out, what I would have to charge in rent just to make the math make sense to support the property itself and the taxes and everything else is, it's daunting. So we're gonna have to let the market play itself out, and I live in a free country. I don't want to be taking people's property away. It might be mine, it might be yours. But it's a market-driven thing, and if I can't continue to afford it, I might have to leave the state. But it's a state issue, it's zoning issues, it's a local issue, not necessarily at the federal level.
Thank you. Could you pass that to Mr. Cortes? Okay. Can you work with other parties in a respectful, civil manner? Can you give an example when you have done so?
Yeah, so we work in coalitions a lot. I'm running with the Peace and Freedom Party, a third party, but specifically our campaign is an intervention. We're not in this to play the same business as usual, status quo politics that got us into the very messes that we're experiencing today. Skyrocketing homelessness, people overwhelmingly that are defaulting on their loans because of medical debts. I can work with other people. I worked with children with special needs for many years. I work right now in a call center where I have to be very, very civil with people who are very escalated. But I will not stand for apathy. I will not stand for the status quo and business as usual that right now churns people up like sausage in this country and leaves them to rot while handing out bailouts to billionaires. So I can be plenty civil, and all the people who know me can attest to that. But people know that anything that we've won in this country has not when we appealed to our president, but when we showed enough force and enough strength of will and character to actually ask and demand it. So that's what I plan on bringing into the halls of power, is the urgency that's desperately required today.
Dr. Horvath?
At the San Diego Association of Realtor debate, I said at the end that we need a psychologist in Congress. We need someone who can go in, use their organizational development skills, their education, and their experience to create change. This requires collaboration and not someone saying they can do something, but a proven record of change in government. I have worked with Navy to recommend a $55 to $110 million cost savings in 2018 on a program that impacts all sailors and soldiers in the military. I made recommendations of $4 million in cost savings through federal government training programs that work. We need people who can do the work, who have the experience in federal government, and not say that they will do it. And as for you, Mr. Cortes, you jumped on the stage at Valley Center and got kicked out. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day about that.
Mrs. Jahn?
Thank you. Yes, I can be civil. I'm not a member of a party. I'm running no party preference. I also understand that the job doesn't mean I'm going to go in and start dictating to people what it is they're going to do, what we're going to get done, everything else. I understand that being voted to Congress means that you're going to go there and work with 434 other people. And that means I'm going to have to use my interpersonal skills, the skills that I've used with stagehands for 20 plus years, and they're a rowdy bunch. So if you can get along with them, and you can get along with anybody actually, and that's something I actually do a lot of work on personally as a person. Thank you.
Mr. Wilkins?
Okay, so like I said, I worked in Congress, 116th Congress last year. We we had 85 hearings. We passed 55 bills out of the House. Yeah, so I got experience working with the staff level. So it's 435 members and their staff. But their staff can be kind of difficult to work with. But what's more difficult is working with your counterparts in the Senate, because it's like high school there. So you got to understand, there's turf. Everybody's very skeptical. You're an outsider. I was an outsider. I'm an outsider here. I mean, this is normal. Yeah, I've already done it. I got it right here. We accomplished a lot in the most bipartisan committee on the Hill, and that's not just a talking point. It is the most bipartisan, and it has the largest jurisdiction over the United States as well as commerce in the United States. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. It's back to Dr. Horvath.
Okay.
Okay, what would you side with? 1, your party, 2, your conscience, or 3, your constituents?
Well, I've been running on the platform of siding with my constituents. I don't have a party. I'm a no party preference person. I started this conversation back in August stating that I'm sick and tired of partisan politics. Republicans and Democrats are fighting on the Hill, and it is unhealthy for the country to witness what has happened in the past 2 years. It's very painful for me as a psychologist to watch other people come to me and talk about the issues that they faced. It is unfair to our country that we have to go through this. What I would do in Congress is work with, not the laughing man in the back, but I would work with the people who are actually willing to and interested in creating change for the country. Thank you very much.
Lucinda, Mrs.
Mrs.
Jahn.
Jahn?
Well, first of all, I believe in principle-centered leadership. And as a part of that, my conscience would have to be a part of that, first and foremost. And then my constituents. I also know that there are bills that they put things in that you would think that you know, this should be easy, you should vote for this, you know, it's a thing to do, but then they tag something on the end of it that if it's unconscionable, I'm not gonna vote for it. But I have to be a principled person first, and there's the constituency.
Mr. Wilkins?
You can look at my values on my website, and those will what I go by and what I feel God's leading me to do. Like you led me to run for Congress here, whether I win or lose. I'm just, it's like a bowl, you know, it's like a rodeo, where I'm just riding that bowl, and it's great. This is a great ride. But back to voting with your conscience, it's not my conscience. Those are my values, and the values, the greatest value is love. Love of the people of the district and of the country. So policy is extremely complex, and you can't just break it down and do a couple talking points. You can't, and you have to study. It took me 2 months to study one issue, and it was a good issue, and we had to get through the emotions of it and look at it from a rational perspective. So, I mean, I got my history here. You can look at my website and figure out where all land. Thanks.
Mr. Cortes?
So my conscience is the same thing that brought me into politics in the first place. I knew it was wrong that an unarmed man was shot and killed in the parking lot of my dentist's office, and it's the same conscience that ties me to the interest of the working class. That is always going to be my moral compass, is how will this impact the majority of the people in this country, not just the 30 or 40% of people that voted in the last election, or how it's going to play out in a poll. My conscience is always going to be guided for the people that build our society, the people that include the undocumented that don't have the ability to vote, that include the people who are incarcerated right now and lost their ability to vote through voter suppression. That is what's going to drive my conscience, not just a very abstract, idealized notion of constituents, but the working people, not only of the 50th district, but of the world. And that's why I take the hard stance on the anti-war movement. It's not only about our people here in the 50th district. My conscience extends to the people of other countries that we're bombing and sanctioning as well. So that is how I would vote if I was elected to Congress.
Thank you. It comes back now to Mrs. Jahn. Next question. What do you want, or what are you willing to give up in exchange for protected status or a path to citizenship for dreamers?
Just to let you know, we really screwed up this whole immigration thing. We haven't made the law clear, and Reagan's actions just muddled the whole picture. The fact of the matter is, they came into this country illegally, and there are legal pathways. But we've also had in the past green cards, work permits, visas. We've had a better functioning system before, and I think we need to re-examine some of that. But to protect the dreamers as a class, it's not fair to the people who did it the right way. It's just not.
Mr. Wilkins?
You know, like I keep saying, policy is complex, and you have to be very compassionate with your decisions. But you also have, through love, is to enforce justice. You know, and that goes with violent criminals and anybody who has worked their tail off for this country. You got to consider them for citizenship. But you just, you can't open it up to everyone, because that brings in violent criminals. I'm not saying that everyone, because I worked hand in hand with immigrant workers down in the valley where I grew up on a farm. Okay, they're close to my heart. It's like family. So I got a huge heart for them, and I didn't grow up with a ton of money. I grew up on a farm in a trailer. You know, so you have to think about it critically. It can't be in a couple talking points, and it can't be hard nosed. You can't come in because you're fleeing injustice from your government. Right? We want to bring in everybody to the United States, as long as you're a contributor.
Mr. Cortes.
I would give up nothing, alrighty? Nothing. These are human dignity. This is a matter of human dignity. These rights are not up for debate. The fact is that we mobilized in 2006 to win these rights. It wasn't the other way around. The ruling class didn't come to us after, we realized, that it's so wrong that we've been oppressing and deporting and criminalizing your families. No, it was tens of thousands of students that took the streets and reminded them of our power. And for that reason, I'm not willing to spit on that legacy of our people that came out into the streets in 2006. I will say this, my stance on fighting for the Dreamers is full amnesty right now, full citizenship right now for their parents, for everyone who is fleeing the wars that we're causing for natural resources. There is no negotiation with the Peace and Freedom Party on these issues. These are not issues to be debated or analyzed. We've looked it over. We've done the analysis, and our human dignity is not up for debate. So, as far as what we would support, I'm not willing to give up anything for our people, like anything to forsake our people. I'm going to say.
Dr. Horvath.
Well, this is right up my alley. I worked for an immigration holding facility as a marriage and family therapist. And I also worked for Social Security during the last amnesty program in the late 1980s. And one of the things we need to do to further immigration reform is to look at the Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibilities Act of 1996 that was authorized and signed over multiple times by Clinton, Bush, and Obama. Asylum is a human right. Therefore, it's a formal process for asylum seekers, for people who actually are running from a war. But there's a different non-asylum immigration process where employment-based migration happens based upon chain migration instead of chain migration or the stake theory, immigration where family members are not the reason for someone to come here. Thank you. There's more.
Thank you. You start with it.
Oh, yeah, I started with
Yeah,
it.
you started with that, so it goes to Mr. Wilkins.
Right, thank you.
How are you promoting the importance of obtaining a complete and accurate population count in Census 2020?
Complete and accurate census count.
How are you promoting?
How am I promoting it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, complete and accurate, and we worked on this on consumer protection. You have to look at privacy issues with holding it in a database. You don't want everybody's personal information. Now, people go out to your house if you didn't get onto the online database, put your address in. So, I mean, it's going on, right? It's happening. So, I don't know how else to promote it. Like, how am I promoting it? Be home when they come at your house.
How are you promoting the importance of obtaining a complete and accurate?
Yeah, okay, so it's important because we need to make sure the communities have a complete picture who lives in that community. I mean, okay, that's it.
Mr. Cortes.
We're promoting these issues in the same way that we promote a lot of our issues, by informing and educating our people about the importance of what's going on, about what the census is about. It happens every 10 years. For anyone who has filled out a census as a Latino or Chicano person, there's a whole series of questions that you have to fill out that are extra questions. Informing our people about these issues is the primary task of how we spread awareness and how we do it. So, through mass organizations like the Answer Coalition, through our resource center, the San Diego Justice Center, this is how we put on forums about what is going on in our civil society right now. As far as, and we also listen to people when they're explaining why they're apprehensive. I mean, we're living in a climate of fear that people are being attacked by ICE at their homes. Someone was just shot in the face in New York City after being targeted at their home. I know someone who's been deported for simply sitting in a park after dark and loitering, and they were arrested for that reason. We're trying to educate our people, and that's how we're spreading awareness of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Back up to Dr. Horvath, please.
So as a federal government employee, I worked for a variety of organizations. As a business owner, I go out and I promote jobs for the Census Bureau through our corporation. And I also want you to understand that it's very important for you to, personally to fill out the census information, because regardless of race or ethnicity, it basically provides payments and grants and all of those important factors to various ethnic groups, research, and so on. So within my job as the CEO of my corporation, we continually push for those, for actually going out and creating change within the community through Census Bureau, through changes in government, and so on. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Jahn.
Well, I'm not doing anything to promote it. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a single individual that has to work for a living, so I'm not promoting the census, but I would remind you that the purpose of it is for your representation. So it's important to fill that out. It's done every 10 years because it makes a difference to your community in terms of what representation you have in Congress. It's your civil responsibility so that your community gets their fair share of the money and the representation that comes with filling it out. But I mean, I see it as a civic duty, and no, I'm not promoting it. I don't really have the means for that.
Thank you. Mr. Cortes, please. Okay, what do you believe the role of central government should be in regards to health care?
I believe that right now, private insurance companies rule our healthcare system. Billionaires are dictating whether people live or die. I believe that the government's role in all of this is safeguarding our access to basic human rights that right now we don't have. We have protections for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what do any of those mean when you don't have healthcare or housing or an education? So our approach to the role of the government would be to eliminate the private insurance companies and serve and open an actual office for single-payer health care, for Medicare for All, as it's colloquially and commonly known, to provide that resource, and by paying for it, by taxing the billionaires like Jeff Bezos, who aren't paying any federal taxes right now, and closing those big loopholes that are going to defense contractors and private military contractors. Our belief is that the role of the government should be preserving people's ability to have human dignity, like guaranteed housing, healthcare, and education, and also safeguarding the social order that comes from having housing, healthcare, and education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Horvath.
Well, let's start with Medicare. Medicare costs our nation $3.6 trillion a year. Of that, we're only collecting $1.4 trillion in premiums from all areas. That means every year we are running in debt for Medicare. We cannot afford Medicare for all at this point. And so I'm looking at the Affordable Care Act and how we can change the Affordable Care Act, because we've already spent billions or millions and billions of dollars to go and change the program. So I don't agree with large corporations running healthcare, but I also have a problem with our going out and using a Medicare for All program. So in Congress, I would work with the current leadership and incoming congressional reps to change how that operates. I don't agree that people should be paying $2,000 a month for healthcare and only making $2,000 a month. So we need to find a happy medium in there. Thank you.
Okay, well, my take is I think the Affordable Care Act needs to go. It's 906 pages of legislation. And no, we can't afford Medicare for all. It's not realistic. There are countries that have a blended system of private and public health care. There are 36 other bills that 906 pages references. So if you really want to understand the Affordable Care Act, you have innumerable pages to go through. And from what I've scanned through it, they know we can't afford it either in Washington. And we're not arguing about your health care, we're arguing about who's going to pay for it and who's not.
Mr. Wilkins.
we can look at social programs like Social Security and federal student loan programs as examples of centralized government programs that have increased the amount of pork in our government. So centralized government, run healthcare, anything government run, it's a joke. But I would suggest if we could think about a solution would be to distribute and allow small, medium, and large insurance companies and doctors to create an innovative healthcare atmosphere that serve an individual that has a medical issue closest. Okay, so.
Thank you. We're moving back up to Dr. Horvath. Congress has the power to declare war. If elected, what would be your policy related to the Middle East, Latin America, and Asia?
First off, one of the things that has happened in this country is that the executive office has expanded War Powers Act. We need to get that back under control, back into Congress. It is not 100% in Congress. There are executive orders that are being signed by the president that should not be signed. We need Congress to get back into the business of overseeing War Powers Act. And what I would do is work with Congress to make sure that we have War Power Acts within Congress and not at the executive level. Because the president is supposed to ask Congress for permission to go to war, but we're going around and working around the executive orders. And they need to stop. They need to stop. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Jahn.
I would have to agree with that. Congress needs to take back its powers, its responsibilities under our Constitution. And we shouldn't just be able to have one man take us into long-term wars. That's why that power was granted to Congress and not simply to an executive. As far as the policy of the Middle East, when peace breaks out in the Middle East, let me know. That would be news. I think in some ways, though, we keep giving them money and they keep behaving badly, but why stop behaving badly when you keep getting paid for it? So I think we need to start examining not just the war, but our aid to them, our relationship with them, and start having some standards, and we behave in accordance with our standards.
Mr. Wilkins.
Right about after 9/11, the president was granted war powers against terrorists for preeminent attacks. That's what happened to Soleimani, is they were seeing a preeminent attack and they surgically struck him without any civilian casualties. Perfect. So you gotta be nimble enough to face a threat. You really need to be nimble. And you can, to get into a large scale war, Congress needs to have the say. But when it comes to fighting terrorism, which is, you gotta be very nimble, because it's terrorism here, terrorism there, single acts, and you can't blanket a whole area. It's not like we're bombing with B-52 bombers. You have to be extremely surgical, and that goes with building an intelligence capability and long term. That's why we have long wars, is because we have terrorist organizations that continue to evolve and continue to be there. So I have no problem with killing terrorists.
Mr. Cortes.
These endless wars for profit have been raging for longer than I've been alive, some of them, right? Some of them we've been constantly engaged, like the economic wars against the Cuban people, the long-standing attacks we've been doing against the Venezuelan people, and the people of the Middle East and Asia as well. We've heard some of the hype trying to gear us up for war, even tonight on this stage, about fearing China, about fearing other people across the world. But my big question is always asking, who are these wars being fought for and who do they benefit? The humanitarian argument that we use to invade these countries never plays out. They turned sovereign nations that, like Libya, that once was the gem of North Africa, into failed states. So we stand, as a congressman, I would stand firmly against war. I would stand firmly against the engagement of the executive office to engage in new wars. Specifically, I would fight for that power to be vested back into Congress as well. But I would take an even firmer stance that these are not debating points, and we would have to address who these wars are being fought for and who they're profiting, which is a very small percentage of people.
Thank you. To pass it back up to Mrs. Jahn. Okay, this will be our final 1-minute question. The next 3 questions will be yes or no questions, and then we'll go to closing statements. So Mrs. Jahn, you get to go first. What initiative do you plan to take to support working class veterans?
I once did an internship in John McCain's office, and talk about public image and private conduct. I used to sign his name with a machine to letters from veterans all over the country, which basically was, John, I've tried everything else, you're my only hope, my last hope. I read a lot of those letters as that intern. If we have asked someone to fight and die for our country, and we sent them out there, they are our responsibility. We need to take care of them. And because we asked them to, we sent them there. It's a responsibility we have as a society that sends them there. And it's a big bureaucracy that needs a lot of cleaning up. I won't tell you it's simple. I'm a veteran myself.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkins.
The world's very complex when you get out of the military. I just transitioned out of the military about a year ago. It's hugely complex. And then I went over to Congress. Like, how confusing is that, right? But I learned a lot, and not a lot of veterans have that opportunity to go to Congress. So a 3-day course in transition is not enough. And so we need to take a look and make the DoD become responsible for responsibly transitioning veterans and giving them the whole picture and showing them, that just like with students, you're getting into photography, like how well is that job going to pay? Veterans don't know what they're getting into. We don't. And I was just lucky, my buddy just died because a drug overdose. So his whole identity was wrapped up in being a veteran and being a SEAL. So it certainly needs to change.
Mr. Cortes.
Working class veterans are experiencing a lot of the same issues that many of us are experiencing. Displacement, trauma, worsening conditions for their stability all the time. How I aim to help working class veterans is fighting for the platform issues that we've made a priority for our campaign. Housing, healthcare, and education. These are the main reasons that a lot of people join the military in the first place in a lot of instances. So giving these people guaranteed access to not have to go and fight imperialist wars for the profit of some comfortable billionaire is how we're going to help these working class veterans. And for the ones that have already had to experience the horribleness of war, that have experienced the traumatic brain injuries, the indoctrination of stabbing bags with bayonets and screaming kill, we're going to provide real resources, therapy. We're going to offer community programs to invest our people into our communities as builders, not destroyers. So that is how we intend, as the Peace and Freedom Party, of assisting our veterans by bringing them home, by closing the bases that right now do more to oppress the world than help it, and by giving them real relief, not just good words.
Thank you. Dr. Horvath.
Okay, as a veteran who has worked with the San Diego Military and Veterans Advisory Council Board of Supervisors, I know there are already programs in the community through San Diego County. I've worked with the One VA Community Advisory Advocacy Board and making recommendations to the VA already on making changes for veterans. The main thing I see are various issues with housing for veterans, homelessness, things of that nature, and continued improvements to benefits processing and support of lifelong career transition services. It's currently available in Department of Defense and also at the VA. And most importantly, as your congressional representative, I will work to be in as a member of the House Veteran Affairs Committee to provide support and improvements to the Veterans Administration and the benefits and the healthcare services. Thank you.
I'm going to take the microphone now. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to do yes or no questions to try to cover a few more questions before we go to closing statements. You will each give only a yes or no question, although I totally recognize these are complex issues. Okay? 1. Would you join the Belt and Road Initiative and join China in a mission to help the third world develop apart from the IMF and World Bank? And we begin with Mr. Wilkins.
No.
Mr. Cortes.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Horvath.
Can you say that again? That was a mouthful.
Would you join the Belt and Road Initiative and join China in a mission to help the third world develop apart from the IMF and World Bank?
I'll say yes for that.
And Mrs. Jahn?
I'll say no until I know more about it.
Question number 2. Do you support the construction of a national bullet train system? And we begin with Mr. Wilkins.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't catch that last word.
Do you support the construction of a national bullet train system?
A bullet train.
Bullet train system.
Yes.
Dr. Horvath?
No.
Mrs. Jahn? Jahn. Okay. We're just moving right along here, aren't we? All right. Do you stand with a woman's right to choose? And we begin with Mr. Cortes.
Yes. Sorry, it's just one word. My
Just
bad.
one word. Yes or no question. Dr. Horvath.
Yes.
Mrs. Jahn.
Yes.
Mr. Wilkins.
What are we choosing?
You don't get to choose, yes or no.
No, not answer.
That's okay. Very good. All right, we're going to go to closing statements now, and I'm going to read to you before we begin with our candidates the statement that was submitted by Mr. Amar. Thank you. I am so sorry. I just can't remember that. It says, Dear MEChA de Palomar College and community members, as a Mexican Palestinian American who grew up not being considered Mexican enough for my family in Mexico, Palestinian enough for my family in Gaza, or American enough in the eyes of some of my fellow countrymen because of the sound of my name, the values championed by your student body deeply resonates with me. Almost a decade ago, I was a student interning for a candidate of color. That experience inspired me, not because my candidate was perfect, but because that campaign gave me something so rarely offered to our community, a voice. That's why I'm running for Congress, to give you a voice just like others gave me one all those years ago, and work to enact real change communities like yours here in North County and mine in East County can benefit from. We've been ignored far too long by insiders in Washington, and we're going to change that together. That's why it pains me not to be with you all tonight due to a prior commitment I made to a family who offered to open their home for a meet and greet with their neighbors over a month ago. I look forward to scheduling a future forum with MEChA and the League of Women Voters of North County soon, and standing and fighting alongside you alongside this election. I hope you'll be my voice on March 3rd. I promise to be yours in Congress. We'll begin now with Mr. Cortes with our closing statements of 1 minute each.
Do I get up or?
You may have the microphone.
Oh, thank you.
How's that for a thought?
That much appreciated.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm running in the 50th district, not because I see this as a stepping stone for my career, or because I just want attention, or I want to just play nice at the oppressor's table. I'm running this as an intervention. I'm running this as a hometown boy who really, really knows what the people of the 50th district need. It's urgency around these issues. people are so disenfranchised and disillusioned with the voting system. Somebody up here brought up that 30% of the people are no party preference now, and even less vote at this day and age, and where we're at in the district. That explains why. Why is because there's more of the same, more of this, let's talk it out, let's have a civil conversation around issues like housing, healthcare, education, subsidized childcare, war. What we're running this campaign for is to be the voice for the voiceless, to be the voice of the people who can't just run for public office as their job, who can't take off time to go to work, from work to come and participate in the political process. That is why we want your vote, for guarantees and to be a part of the actual solution of this country.
Mr. Wilkins.
So in closing, I'd like to kind of draw an illustration. We all tend to look through kind of a porthole, and it's really smoky. And a lot of people just get their information from news, and it can be very polarizing, and both sides are very complicit in polarizing and making talking points simple when they're extremely complex and take months and months of research. And I suggest going to the Congressional Research Service and other nonprofits and think tanks that are working to solve policy issues. And we are more closer to the center than you think, but we've been just tricked into thinking that we're against each other. We're not. We want to come to the center and solve policy issues. And I'm not your moral enemy. I'm here to help. That's why I'm running. I'm running on my faith. I'm running because God called me to do this. Thanks.
I continue to learn more about the challenges we face. The issues presented here this evening do not have easy answers. However, I am not here to teach you helplessness and fear. I am not here to tell you that our community is not up to the challenge of solving these very human problems compassionately. Freedom is not free. There is a price. The cost of freedom is taking responsibility for yourself and for your community at all levels, local, national, and global. I'm not here to play the game of politics with you. We are fortunate to live in a free nation. We can make it even better by exercising our civil right to vote. Your life is affected by the decisions and legislation enacted by our leadership. I understand the gravity of the work before me should you grant me the opportunity. You have a right to know what is going on in Washington, D.C. Knowledge is power, and informed people are free people. Thank you for your kind attention, and I will be available after the debate if you have any questions.
Dr. Horvath.
Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today, and to the college and everyone who took the time to come out today. I'm inspired each time I speak with a group of potential voters and just people in general. I walk the communities. I knock on doors. I talk to people. We've spoken about a lot of issues today, yet the one issue we haven't spoken about, didn't touch on, is what do you want and is important to your life. I'm about you. I'm not about what someone else says. I'm running for Congress for the community. One of my favorite sayings is, in times of crisis and chaos, we save ourselves by saving each other. Not one of us, not anyone, has ever been saved alone. And I want you to remember that, because in Congress, we need the constituents to work with us, not against us. We want to be here for you, to provide you with the answers. And thank you very much for your time.
I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I think you have exercised your right to listen to your candidates. I hope you've learned many interesting things tonight. I thank the candidates for being here. Running for office is not easy in this day and age, and we cannot help but admire those who choose to devote their very important time in their lives to striving for public office. Not all succeed, but they try, and I think that's a significant measure of our democracy and how valuable we think our government is, in spite of all the negative influences that we often hear about. And with that, I'd like to remind you all that there is a wonderful resource for you to find nonpartisan information for the primary election. It's called Voter's Edge. We have bookmarks for you at the back. It is guaranteed nonpartisan. It provides you with both sides of the issues. It provides you with access to the candidates' websites, and it gives you financial information on who's getting money from whom for what. Very useful information when you're voting. Thank you very much for coming. It's been our pleasure to help you tonight.